Number 5. Last night was a blur. My friend dragged me out to catch the opening band at a local dive. A few drinks in, I instinctively patted my pocket. Empty. My phone was gone. A wave of panic hit me. I tore the bar apart, the sticky table, the grimy bathrooms, the floor under the stools. Nothing. I finally borrowed my friend's phone to call mine. It rang twice, then someone answered. All I heard was a low raspy giggle before they hung up. I called again and again, but it just went straight to voicemail. Defeated and resigning myself to a headache and a new phone bill, I called it a night. I collapsed into my apartment, and there it was, lying innocently on my nightstand. The source of my stress, right where I'd left it. I still don't know who answered the call. Number 4. Every morning, I was the final stop, the last kid to get picked up by the school bus. One chilly day, I was alone at the corner when an unfamiliar bus pulled up. It was completely empty. The driver, a stranger with a tight, unsettling smile, swung the door open. "Hop on," he called out, his voice a little too cheerful. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Something was wrong. "Where are the other kids?" I asked, clutching my backpack straps. "We'll go get them now," he insisted, his smile unchanging. "Just get on." His tone grew increasingly pushy, but he remained planted in his seat, just waiting. I stood my ground, shaking my head. "No, thank you." After a tense silence, he simply shrugged, the door hissed shut, and the empty bus rolled away. A few minutes later, the real school bus arrived. That night, when I casually mentioned the encounter, my parents went silent. I remember the sudden scramble for the phone, the worried whispers as they made frantic calls. Looking back, I realized how truly frightened they were for me. Number 3. I rented the apartment a few years ago from a friend who just finished a full top-to-bottom renovation. He put it up for sale, but when a buyer didn't materialize, I offered to rent it in the interim. It was supposed to be temporary, a fresh start. I realized something was deeply wrong shortly after moving in. It was the woman next door. She was perhaps 45, but stress and neglect had carved her face into something much older. She'd stay up all night, listening to an evangelical Christian radio show and talking loudly to an unseen companion. It wasn't just annoying, it was a grating, perpetual disturbance that robbed me of sleep. Finally, I snapped. I walked over and knocked, intending to politely ask her to keep the volume down. She opened the door just enough for me to get a flash of the interior. The walls were a horrifying canvas, crosses painted in frantic, contrasting colors, and words like Jesus and angels were scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted solid black, blocking out any trace of daylight. The air was thick and fetid, and the floor was a nightmare of damp, yellow-stained carpet, reeking of decay, with cockroaches scuttling amongst what looked like dry dog feces, though I saw no dog. When I asked her to please lower the radio, she just stared at me, her eyes flat and empty, and silently slammed the door. Moments later, the radio's volume spiked, as if in malicious defiance. The next night, my girlfriend was staying over. I woke suddenly in the suffocating dark and saw a shadow next to the bed, a figure leaning over us as we slept. I assumed it was a hypnagogic hallucination, something I sometimes experienced in the dark. But then the shadow spoke. "You should lock your doors at night," my neighbor whispered. It was her. She'd broken in while we slept and was standing right beside my head. I saw the glint of something she was holding in her hand, though in my panic, I couldn't identify it. Then, as calmly as if she'd walked into her own kitchen, she turned and walked out of the apartment. The full terror of the situation hit me a moment later. Who knows how long she'd been standing there, watching us. The following morning, a new, bizarre scene unfolded outside my bedroom window. I heard strange noises. She was down below, muttering to herself, speaking in tongues. In her hand, she held a plastic bag. It was a sweltering day, and a stench of death drifted up from the bag. It contained her rotting dead dog. At this point, I was paralyzed with fear. She was clearly and violently unhinged. I went upstairs, knocked on the door of another apartment, and asked the men who answered what the hell was going on with the woman next door. He looked as terrified as I felt. She had broken into his place too. He was watching TV with his kids one evening and had gotten up for a snack, only to find her standing motionless behind his couch, staring at him. And in her hand, she was holding a power drill. My blood ran cold. That was the object she'd held while standing over my bed. I immediately called the police. They were familiar with her. Apparently, she was a violent schizophrenic who had gone off her medication. But there was a shocking complication. They couldn't force her out or even enter her apartment without permission because she owned it. Their only option was to wait for her to leave the building. I sat up for 2 agonizing days, waiting for her next move. I figured she'd run out of cigarettes eventually. Finally, at 2 a.m., I heard her door shut. I saw her walking across the road toward the 7-Eleven, a small shop in the street. I called the police instantly. Within 2 minutes, 3 squad cars and a special transport van descended on the scene. They restrained her swiftly, threw her into the van, and drove off to some institution. It was over in a flash. Suddenly, the entire block was silent, as if she had never existed. I never saw her again, but the nightmares persist. The image of her shadow, leaning over my bed, watching me sleep, is one I can't shake. Number 2. I was 15 minutes from clocking out of my night shift when a massive crash tore through the silence of the office. I jumped up and went to check. Someone had hurled a sizable rock through one of the large front windows. The act itself was jarring, but what made it truly unsettling was the location, an empty industrial district at 11:30 at night, far from any residential area. Who was out here, and why? I quickly called security, left a damage report, and decided to cut my losses and head home. As I walked out, the silence of the empty street amplified my fear. The image of that shattered glass, and the sheer force behind it, was unnerving. I ended up sprinting to my car, fumbling with the keys, and peeling out onto the road. I was almost home, the adrenaline beginning to subside, when a chilling thought hit me. I hadn't unlocked my car. When I got in, the door had been unlocked already. My heart hammered. Had someone been waiting inside? I quickly reached a hand back, frantically patting the back seat, searching for a lurking presence. Nothing. I tried to dismiss it as panic making me forget. About 30 minutes later, I was safe inside, but still wired. I called a friend who said he was out drinking, and I desperately needed to join him to settle my nerves. I grabbed my bicycle and headed out. It was a clear, moonlit night. I was cruising along, enjoying the gentle rhythm of the ride, when I heard the distinct whir of another bike approaching from behind. I straightened up and moved over to the edge of the road, expecting a quick pass. Instead, the rider slowed and came up beside me really slowly. As he drew parallel, he turned his head and shot me a look, a smile that was purely, utterly insane. It was a wide, unnatural grin that felt less like an expression and more like a mask of malice. I flinched, utterly taken aback, and he pedaled on. That's when I saw it. He was riding my mother's bicycle. The sight of the familiar, brightly colored frame sent a spike of pure, raw terror through me. I didn't think, I just stood on the pedals and sprinted the hell home. When I skidded into my driveway, the dread was immediately confirmed. My mother's bike was missing. And one of my car doors, the back left one, was wide open. A door I had never had a reason to unlock or open while driving. He hadn't been waiting in the back seat. He had been there, gotten out, taken the bike, and left the door as a deliberate sign. Number 1. My job was perfect for a night owl and a gamer, third shift security at a remote campground. From midnight to 8 in the morning, I was king of a quiet dark domain. My office was a tiny poorly lit 8 by 8-inch shack, surrounded by nothing but woods and pitch-black silence. Most nights, I'd settle in, plug in my PS2, and game until the sun came up. Even on a busy night, I'd only interact with 1 or 2 people. It was a life of sweet isolated simplicity. During my first week, the guy I was replacing, a tired-looking veteran of the night shift, casually mentioned something odd. "See that payphone a few feet from the shack?" he asked, pointing into the gloom. "It rings. Every night. Precisely at 4:17 a.m. Just once." He figured it was an automated line test, but he'd never had the nerve to answer it. For the first few months, I barely registered his warning. It was the middle of summer, and I kept the windows sealed against the humidity. I was deep in my games, unaware of the eerie little ritual happening outside my door. But by mid-August, I started leaving the windows open to catch the cooler night air. And sure enough, at 4:17 a.m. sharp, a distinct sickly ring would cut through the silence. It was a dreadful sound, somehow muffled and tinny, almost as if the payphone were ringing from the bottom of a well. The sheer consistency of it was what finally got to me. One night, I decided to break the routine. I set my alarm for 4:15 a.m., walked to the phone, and stood there, heart knocking against my ribs. The moment the ring started, I snatched up the receiver. It wasn't a dial tone or static, it was the quiet of an open connected line, as if someone was there, just holding their breath. I called out a few tentative hello, then hung up. I repeated this experiment every night for a week. Always the same, 4:17 a.m., one ring, complete silence. I eventually shrugged it off, concluding it must be some ancient faulty equipment test, and left the phone alone for the rest of the month. The calendar flipped to October, and the change in the air, the crisp cold scent of autumn, seemed to reawaken my curiosity. On a whim, I decided to answer the phone one last time. At 4:17 a.m., I picked up the receiver and immediately launched into a series of forceful repeated hello. "Who is this?" Then, the dead air shifted. I heard a sound like air being desperately sucked through clenched teeth, followed by a voice that was pure nightmare, deep, scratchy and rough, like someone had gargled gravel and was fighting for every syllable. The voice said only one thing. My first name. My middle name. My last name. My complete name. A voice I had never heard, spoken with chilling clarity in the middle of the night at an anonymous payphone in the woods. My throat seized up, and before I could even process the terror, I slammed the receiver back onto the hook. I scrambled back to the shack, hands shaking, and fumbled for some change. I rattled a few quarters into the coin slot, picked up the phone again, and dialed *69, the code to call back the last number. A computerized voice immediately chimed in, identifying the origin of the last call. The call had originated in California. I was sitting in a campground in Indiana,